Hey everyone, Ben Eubanks here. Welcome to We're Only Human. I'm really pumped to have you, and I'm excited to introduce you to a new friend of mine, Travis Hunsicker. Travis and I got to meet earlier this year at an event, and he shared some things with me. I thought, let's have this conversation not here at a conference, but over the podcast microphone. So we're chatting, and I thought the conversation was going to go one way, and transparently, it went completely different, and I enjoyed it so much. So if you want an insight into how to be a better coach, how to ask better questions, how to drive better actions, this episode is going to give you the key takeaways you need to make that happen. Great conversation here with Travis, and I can't wait to dive in. Here we go.
Don't conduct your analysis in isolation because data is so incredibly powerful.
Not defending just the tribe, but defending the organization.
Those creative people that you really want to keep empowered, keep excited, keep motivated, keep thinking.
A good experience pays dividends down the line.
Stereotypes tend to break down in proximity.
Welcome to We're Only Human, a podcast about human resources, business, technology, and the workplace. My name is Ben Eubanks, your host, and I'm so glad you're here. Hey everyone, welcome to We're Only Human today. I'm so glad you're here with us. Looking forward to a fun conversation today. I'm so excited to be joined by Travis Hunsicker. He and I got to meet earlier this year at a conference, and we were chatting about some of the different things that he was working on, some of the stuff that I was thinking about the industry. And we both speak Southern, so we're both able to understand each other. So I'm excited that he's here. We're going to be talking about talent development, how to grow your people, and some other things along that vein. So Travis, welcome.
Yeah, Ben, thanks for having me. I appreciate the invite. It's a pleasure.
Hey, I'm looking forward to it. Anytime I get a chance to chat with a fellow Southerner. And I also found something interesting. I dug deep into your LinkedIn, like way back. Okay. I went all the way back. And I found that you and I share something in common. We both, at one point in our early careers, we were trying to get our footing. We were driving forklifts. So my first job ever, that's one of the things that I did. And I saw that was on yours.
I did that for a few years. That was an interesting point in time. But
you're like that. You never knew how that would come in handy later on, like avoiding obstacles at work. And we could throw some other fun metaphors in there too, I'm sure. So before we get to some of the good stuff we're going to be talking about today, would you tell the audience more about who you are and what you do now, please?
Yeah, my name's Travis. I'm located in Birmingham, Alabama, and I work for a mid-sized CPA firm here in Birmingham, where I'm over talent development and coaching.
All right, excellent. So I think we'll start with that. We'll start with talent development. We'll start with this as a concept, and I'd love to hear from you when it comes to some of the things that you're thinking about, things you're working on. What are you excited about right now?
My main focus with work is career mapping. And what we do with the firm is we work with staff from the associate level up to the manager level. And we basically do a very structured formal gap analysis with them. We ask them, where do you see yourself in a few years? Where are you at right now? Where are the gaps between where you're at and where you want to be? And then what resources, whether it be training, coaching, mentorship, maybe programs through our LMS system that we can provide them to help them close the gap and get where they want to be at.
How often are you having those conversations or seeing the people talk through these things and that what's next isn't exactly clear or they're not even sure what those options are?
I tell staff that it doesn't have to be a sequential hierarchical order. And what I mean is if you're a supervising senior or if you're a manager and you decide that you don't want to move to principal or director, that you want to stay at your role but specialize, we will do what we can to offer you the resources you need to make that happen.
I'm thinking about when we had engineers on our team, which not the same thing as CPAs, but some similarities in terms of like year one, year two, continue working up the level of complexity and the projects they're working on, things like that.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I remember seeing happen for the first time is we had someone that said, listen, I know the next step for me is to be a more senior engineer, but I don't really want to do that. I also don't want to be like a manager where I get out of this completely. And we ended up blending a role where we got to take the best of their strengths of working with other people, knowing the technical side, but being able to lead a project from a technical perspective instead of just being the budget person and the headcount person, just doing the manager stuff. And so I love the chance to give people that chance to play to their strengths and really step into those kind of opportunities. Well, I know you have to have this conversation with your own people about how they're developing and how they're going to take different paths. Talk about how you would help individual contributors who might want to do something more, but they might not be sure what that next step would be.
One thing I suggest with our managers and principals directors is for more junior staff to sit in on client meetings to observe. And it's not as much about, at least in my mind from the outside looking in, it's not as much about understanding the processes behind what's going on with that client, but it's to understand the client's needs to gain a more advisory mindset and to be able to see things from 10,000 feet versus that next task the more somebody can be exposed to that environment and see what those clients' needs are, as a byproduct, I think they're also going to develop more positive relationships with that client, gain their trust. And I think that's going to have a compounding effect on how they can become better advisors for clients.
This certain you've seen this in some of the education experience you have, where when someone's doing a task and the task feels like there's no meaning or purpose beyond it, like
Yes.
again, the engagement's not always there, the excitement, the productivity is not always there, but when I know I'm doing this so that it
Yeah.
unlocks this value, so that it contributes this bigger win for the entire team, that's when people really start to lean in, because they know that they're not just doing this in a vacuum, but they're doing this for a higher purpose.
So that touches on something that I talk to our staff about in career mapping. When we look at different objectives for people in career mapping, I always preface it by saying, I want you to work on things that matter to you that you feel that you're good at and add value, but I don't want that done in a siloed environment. Because if we're going to career map somebody, we're going to do so with the understanding that their career map also properly aligns with the team and the organization's goals in the long term.
One of the things that we are seeing in some of the data out in the market more broadly, if you care to comment on it, is that you see these headlines. I know you're seeing the same thing on LinkedIn that I'm seeing, I'm sure, where people are saying, Gen Z, they're not interested in leadership. They're not interested in these more senior roles. They're not interested in management positions. They just want to stay in their lane. And I don't know if you see that sort of thing in the profession specifically that you're working with or not, but it's one of the things I've been curious to see how that plays out in the market over time, because at some point someone's going to have to step up. And I don't know if that's overgeneralizing them or not. What are your thoughts?
From what I've seen so far with the firm, I don't know that's completely accurate for us, but what I would say is there's a level of hesitation with some staff in making the next step. And I think it comes from a lack of certainty that they're capable of doing it. I had a conversation recently with somebody at the firm where that came up. And I asked them, I said, what is something that you feel that you're really good at and confident doing right now? And they told me, and I said, okay, where were you at with that a year ago? And they explained the same hesitancy. So I asked the same question. I was like, what tells you that you can't do X, Y, or Z without having experienced it first? And they paused. And I said, my point is, just because you haven't done it before, I understand the fear and anxiety that goes along with it, but it doesn't mean you're not capable. It just means you haven't tried it yet. And I think getting people around that mindset and that's what I love about the job. And that's what I think I told you before when we met in Orlando, is that what I love about doing this is I can help people bridge the gap and help them see what they didn't see at first.
See it in them before they see it themselves in
Yeah.
some cases.
I'll joke because I work with CPAs. They're really good at the specific details, but sometimes it's hard to stop and see the forest for the trees and see the potential behind what they're doing right now.
That's one of the things that gets me. When we look at the data that we have on the workforce, we see that we ask them outright, just across the entire spectrum. Again, not just CPAs, but everybody. I'd rather people see the potential in me than just what I can do right now. Whether they're looking to hire me, whether they're looking to develop me, I want them to see what I could be. And interesting, like you said, it's almost a paradox because sometimes they can't see that in themselves. And we're trying to call that out of them, help them develop that. And they're not even sure yet how to go that path. That conversation you just outlined, that very brief one there, I can already hear a little bit of that coach in you helping them to think through that. Because I can't say, hey, you're good at this, because then they might not believe me or they're not sure or whatever else. But if you can ask them the right questions to lead them to that, to realize, oh, I am good at this thing. Even if you don't tell them that, they arrive there, the realization and the action out of that feels more powerful because they're more likely to go and do something about it. Where did you build those coaching muscles to be able to do that and talk people through those things?
Some of that came from grad school. I did my master's online through Georgetown, and we had a class of all the things I remember from my master's program. The one I remember the most was one we did on coaching, and our professors had their own consulting firm out of DC, and they touched on subjective reality, which is something I harp on with new staff. And it's in the context of gaining self-awareness for the person training, but also gain an understanding of the person they're working with, their specific background, what their needs are. Because if I were to train somebody in, say, our business service group, my approach to them might be different from somebody in healthcare or KWA. And it's not always related to their professional expertise. It's related to how they grew up. How do they respond to stress? How do they communicate best? Some people, like I have somebody in audit that I can go and have a conversation with in a relaxed environment and think out loud about what we're working on. There are some people I work with that I need to give them a bullet agenda 2 weeks out so they can mentally prepare for what we're going to discuss. And I think it's our job as leaders to understand those nuances with people and see how they operate differently in order to be effective.
So I want you to talk to some of our friends out there who are doing work in HR, in talent right now, who like, well, Travis, that sounds great, but maybe I'm not the one interacting. It's my leaders interacting with some of these people, and they need to know those things about them. They need to know what makes Travis tick. They need to know the thing that if I do this in a meeting, he's going to shut down, and nothing else I say is going to pull him back out again until he can go and reset on that. How would you recommend leaders start to grasp those things? Is it just having more conversations? Is it asking more questions? Is it being curious? Talk about that a little if you don't mind, because I'd like for the people listening to be able to go empower their leaders to do some of the same things you're talking about here.
The two approaches I can say that I use at the firm, one is just doing pulse checks with people. And what I mean is stopping by somebody's desk like, hey, how was your weekend? And get to know them as a person to where you understand the background, the context, because while we can't fix everything, that they're going through, just having an awareness about their situation outside of work can help us coach through the professional issues and development that we encounter with them. The other side of it, I think, for at least for us, is we use predictive index, and the behavior reports that we have people complete when they come into the firm are really helpful for managers to understand how that person works, what their triggers are, where they're best at, what their drivers are. We have a lot of people here are going to be analyzers, specialists, operators, altruists, guardians. Those are people that are naturally more introverted, that are very good with data, with sequential processes, learning things step by step, being very thorough. It fits the work of a CPA. If it was me, I'm a captain. I'm great at 10,000 feet. I'm the one that I have the ability to, captivate, engender buy-in, and influence. You probably don't want me at 2 centimeters looking at details. That is not my forte.
At 10,000, you're like, hey, there's some details down there.
Doing that.
Let's see stuff. Yeah.
But it takes a self-awareness from those reports and from the one-on-one check-ins with your managers to gain understanding about that, but also simultaneously remaining cognizant of that throughout the process. Don't look at it once and then drop it. Being mindful that when you have your check-ins with your staff, that way when you're meeting with them, you're like, yeah, I have to set the meeting up this way. It's best if I coach him in this way. Constantly being mindful that's going to help the long-term process.
It's interesting. I did not plan for this conversation to go this way, but I was speaking on our AI summit yesterday, talking about in the world right now, there is such a great priority on efficiency, on speed, on just get there. How productive can you be? And the way you just talked about that, you were talking about building trust and building rapport and building connection. And no relationship that I can point to of any substance or value in my life came like that. They all took time, they all took effort to build that.
When I first hired in with the firm, I did a panel interview with who I didn't know then was our managing director, Jonathan, another director, Michael, and then 2 other managers. And Jonathan asked me a question. He said, if you were to get the job, what would be the first thing you would do? And I looked him in the eye. I said, before I do any actual work, before I make any work on any projects, I have to establish proper buy-in with internal stakeholders. Because until people that you work with trust you, until they understand that you're coming out with good intentions and that you mean well for the firm or the company you work for, it doesn't matter how great of an idea you have, it's going to fall on deaf ears. You have to develop the relationship first.
So I love that approach you just talked about there around the first thing you're going to do is not do, but take a breath before you do anything. There's a book written years ago by, I think, Linda Reese, and it was called The Myth of Fit. And it talked about how so often leaders were brought in and they fail in the first year and people are like, oh, they just didn't fit. It just didn't work out. And we just use all these sort of catch-all phrases.
Yeah.
And so many times they're put in that spot saying, okay, go do. And it's not, they don't have time to build that trust that it takes to get some of those things done like you're talking about. So I appreciate that that was your first approach there is to, hey, I'm not going to do anything yet until I really get an awareness, get an understanding, because the first step likely otherwise is going to be the wrong one because you're using a limited view, whatever you've heard before you joined. And chances are it's hard to regain that trust once you potentially trampled it inadvertently.
I agree 100%. I've seen people in the past where they did as new managers, did the exact opposite. They came in wanting to make changes really early on without developing that proper buy-in, and it backfires on them. So I think it's both. When we do recruitment, I tend to ask value-based questions to determine what that person's going to look like from a cultural fit with the team, with the firm. But you also have to allow time for them to acclimate to the role in the group they're with and develop those relationships in order to affect change.
I'm gonna put you on the spot a little bit. What are a couple of those questions that you like to ask? Do you have a favorite question you ask in interviews?
I tend to ask the leadership question, and what I usually ask, I do it with career mapping, I do it with interviews. I ask them how they define great leadership. I had somebody previously say that they would ask candidates what type of manager they would like to work for. And I bristled at that because, in my mind at least, if my future manager is asking me what type of leader I want to work under, I'm already subconsciously framing that question with that person in mind. I'm unintentionally giving them the answer they're looking for. But if you ask somebody, how do you view great leadership? You're more likely to get a genuine response. And it usually tells me two things. It tells me, one, the type of person you want to work for, but also, more often than not, when you list out the traits and characteristics of great leadership, it's coming from a specific bias from your positive and negative experiences throughout your career. And more likely than not, the positive ones are probably going to be where you're going to lean in on as a leader in your own right. So it's insightful to me to see what type of person that they're going to develop into.
That's one of the things you learn in psychology is we have this internal need to be consistent. And so if they're telling you, hey, a leader is like this, a great one's like this, and they end up in a role, we should expect them to hopefully exhibit some of those characteristics that they're saying that they're seeking, they're looking for, they're hoping for, because that's what they are, or they're already lined naturally on those things. Interesting.
Agree.
I want to go back a minute. We talked about career mapping early on. You said you asked some questions like, where do you see yourself? What's next? And then I missed the third part, but it may have been something like, how can we help you get there? Was it something like that part of it?
So normally, the way that I ask a lot of open-ended questions in career mapping, but the gist of it is, where do you see yourself in 2 or 3 years? Where do you see yourself out right now? What do you feel are your strengths and your gaps? And then once we work through the gap analysis based on recommendations from their manager and their own insights, I would ask them, what else do you need from me or your manager to close that gap? Those are just a few opening questions I ask. One that I usually get, the first question isn't important as the second one, but when I ask somebody, where do you see yourself in 2 years? And sometimes they give me a very specific answer. I want to be a manager in 3 years. Sometimes they'll say, I just want to add value in this way for my team. The second question usually gives them pause. And I will ask them, okay, let's say in 2 years' time that happens and you're a manager on whatever team, what would having that give you? And the reason I ask that question is because more often than not, that gets at the root driver for them and what their influence is and what's motivating them. And I think you can usually see a key characteristic from leadership from that response. And a lot of times they gain an increased self-awareness from taking time to pause and think about what they're actually looking for.
So you said that second question, they sometimes pause on that one. That's one I was going to actually go to is I know that there's a weird sort of sense in the world. This is a different conversation that you're having than a performance conversation where you're saying, hey, tell me how your performance is going. Okay. It's a different thing than that because it's a career context. But I know there's some weird like biases where almost everybody thinks they're doing better than they are when it comes to performance piece. How clear do you think they are on that? Where are you now? You said it gives them pause. They have to stop and think about that one a little bit, or do they give you an answer that you would agree with? Talk about that a little bit, because I'm curious about how to reconcile that in my mind with some of the other things we talk about. That same sort of self-assessment when it comes to performance. It's kind of weird sometimes. I don't know if it was the same way on the career side, or if it was a little bit more clear cut because they're trying more objective in the moment. If that makes sense.
From a performance metric standpoint, I think there's a sense of clarity there, and we have reviews done mid-year and annual review, and our managers have regular check-ins with staff regarding their performance and expectations. So I think there's clarity there. I think that not all, but some people, whether it's at our firm or other places I've worked at, there might be a lack of self-awareness as far as the motivating driver for what comes next.
Okay.
What are you really seeking with the title or the role? Is it making an impact? Is it something else? What is that driver behind it? Like for me, I came into this from a long, swirly path. I was substitute teaching years ago, and that's what kind of triggered an interest in coaching. And I've told my COO and people I work with that my driver with work is improving organizational health. That's what I love to do, is to help people close the gap. It affects our retention, but it also affects the positive engagement and overall, I was like happiness sounds like a cliche word, but it improves the satisfaction of people that work here. They want to come here because I think they see the intentionality and focus that we have on the leadership side to develop them. And that's what keeps me coming back and enjoying what I do day after day.
You hear the flip side of that. You hear about organizations, whether they're in that industry or beyond, where let's get you in here, let's grind you until there's nothing left, and then find someone else that's willing to do the same thing for less pay. And people expect that almost. So when they get to enter an organization like yours and there's a very intentional, hey, how are you? Where are you? How can we help you get to the next level? Probably for some of the early people, at least, it's shocking. For someone who's been there for 5 years, they expect that. They're used to it. They've already know how that piece goes. But when someone's actually care about what you want to do next and how we can help you align to that, I can only imagine how that feels for some of the people there, because I've seen it in some of the other companies I've worked for where you have a great leader who does that for his team, but that's not the culture in other teams. So if they move into that team, that shocked look on their face in the best possible way is a great response to that initial embracing of, we see you, we appreciate what you bring, and not only that, we want it to be even more tomorrow. How do we help you get there?
100%. I think I told you this when we met in Orlando, and I've told my CEO this recently. Actually, it's something I harp on with the directors all the time. I encourage them, at least. I have to tell people that, assuming salary and benefits are comparable within a certain industry, that if you can consistently do three things, you'll likely improve retention and have a more engaged, more productive workforce. Do I feel heard? Do I feel like what I say and what I do matters? Do I feel valued? Do I have a sense of belonging? If you can do those things, I think that it has a positive effect on the person and on the team.
Tremendously. And the data we collect on the workforce shows there's a tremendous impact, not just on the organization overall, but within your realm of talent development. There's a really interesting sort of switch that flips where in the data we see someone who does not have a high degree of belonging. Acceptance, respect, and appreciation is how we measure that in the data. When that person is low belonging, you can put any development opportunity in front of them, a coach, a mentor, a training class, a skill building opportunity, and they're like, meh. But if they're high belonging, they're saying, hey, what else you got, Travis? Yes, and that one too. Is there something else coming? What are you planning? How can I get it plugged into that? So I would agree with you, not just, yes, it matters to that person, it matters to the business, but you start to see how it matters when it comes to this growth path that you and I have been talking about for the last 20 minutes or so, how it aligns to that, or it just gets in the way of any progress being made if they feel like nothing else matters.
I think it goes back to what I told my managing director when I hired in. You have to take the time to develop relationships with people that you work with before you can make any impactful work. And I would add to that, do I have a sense of belonging? Do I add value? Am I heard? I would also add, do I have a way forward? Is there clarity on what's next? Do I have the resources available? Do I have guidance from managers that I report to on how to make the next step the most effective way? I think those are the key elements here.
It's not just a vision, but it's some sort of process, some tool, some resources you said, to make sure it becomes reality. Otherwise, it just is always a vision, and a vision that's never realized is just a dream, ever going to arrive there. So we've got to have the other things around it to make it come to life. And
you have to break it down into small incremental actions. And that's what we do with career mapping here.
oh my gosh, I want to go in like 10 different directions. The quote I was going to give you a minute ago, I was thinking about that one on the importance of feeling like you belong, was the old Shakespeare quote where a man with a toothache cannot be in love. Like that overshadows everything in your life until it's fixed. Yep. And in that case, like if I feel like I'm not plugged in, if I feel like my leader doesn't really respect or appreciate me, any of those sorts of things can trigger, I'm not interested in anything else until that one thing, that bottleneck is taken care of. And again, I'm enjoying this conversation so much because I'm getting a bunch of ideas myself. I've written down so many notes over here on this: relationships first before you can have impact, the importance of the values-based questions, all those sorts of things. You're like this incredible secret coach. I did not realize in our earlier conversations how much of a bent you have towards the coaching side, and that's so much fun. This may tie in with some of what you're going to share in a minute. What is an underrated skill for people that are doing the work of talent development today? For people that do work like you and other organizations, what do you think is an underrated skill that more of them should have?
I briefly hinted at it earlier, but I would go back to subjective reality. And you have to understand somebody's story. You have to understand where they're coming from in order to effectively coach them. I think understand the context of who the person is, that they're not just a person to fill a role, that they have a story, and understanding that in the context of where their skills are at is helpful.
There are some people that hear you say that and they're like, yes, obviously, of course. And yet there are some other managers you and I know that would hear that and their mind would be blown to think, oh, really? I've got to know more than just their job title and their pay rate. I've got to know other things about them. But yes, absolutely. That's what I keep going back to the research, but it's so compelling. When you look at the data on this, we asked workers, does your manager understand you? And if they said no, statistically, there was 0% chance of them saying my manager actually supports me on a regular basis. And the flip side, if that manager understands you, yes, it takes off in terms of their ability to actually support you because they know how to support you. It feels like it's one of those logical things that, yes, obviously, duh, Ben. But at the same time, we both could probably quote managers that we've had in our own careers who have been over us who didn't do that well. I know I can at least, and point to they did not do that well. They didn't understand me. And so, no, they did not support me. And I can look back and point at those experiences even decades later and say that was a gap there. Okay.
Let me reframe this with a question though.
Yeah.
If one of the understated skills for talent development is an increased sense of that person's story, their subjective reality, if your reporting manager got to know you more as a person, understood how you operated best, would that not then increase your level of trust?
100%. Yes.
That's the added effect of it. That's the added effect. And I guess like I keep going back to that sense of trust because when you've gained that from your staff, they're more likely to be better, to be more engaged, and they're more likely to be more satisfied with their role. But it starts with the understanding piece. If you take the time to understand them as a person and do those pulse checks with them to see what's going on in their world, they're going to incrementally gain more trust.
I don't know why that is hard, whether it's uncomfortable for some managers to feel like, no, this is work. And so I've got to segment this off. I don't know if it's that. I don't know if it's just a lack of awareness there. If it's a, hey, I'm focused on the to-dos. What have you done for me lately? What have you do for me next? I don't know if it's what of those or some combination of those things that gets managers to just try to skip over that step. But I go back to what I said at the beginning. I've never had a relationship of any value, work or otherwise, that was built without some measure of trust and rapport and connection over time. It doesn't happen the first day you're there or the first week you're there, but it happens over time if you're building a block on that each time versus assuming that it's there and then you never quite get that buy-in you're looking for.
I think it's all the above. And as overused as the word is, I think it takes a certain level of intentionality to make it a reality. And what I mean is, let's say a manager is good about doing weekly check-ins with their staff on what's coming next for the project, what's coming, when this is deliverable going to be met, etc. If we're doing that, are we also using time within that scheduled 1 hour to see where that person's at on the other side of it? You know, what's going on in their world? What's the one question I ask in career mapping, not all the time, but as I see a need for it, is what's your biggest pain point right now? What's your biggest stressor? What are you struggling with right now? And that can give you some insights into what they're working on that they could probably use either some support or guidance as they work through it.
The audience can't see me over here thinking, my brain is like swirling. I'm just thinking about this. This is like a master class in how to not just develop your people, but to make sure your managers are on that, because there's not a single organization that I've met that has a big enough budget to have a bunch of Travises spread out everywhere. There's not enough budget there. They need their managers to be enabled, equipped, ready to have these conversations and to do this. One of my favorite interviews I've done over the last year was with the CHRO of Baylor University. She said that when she is training new managers, she said, these people that work for you are going to be talking about you at the dinner table. They'll either say, you'll never guess what my boss did today. They did this thing and it surprised me and they were so good to me. Or you'll never guess what my boss did today and it crushed my spirit. And you get to choose as a leader what that's going to be. And it comes down to these things that you and I are talking about today, like these fundamentals of trust and rapport and connection and knowing what matters to your people, helping to think about and create a vision for what's next for them. What do I see you doing and excelling at? I see the potential in you and what you can be. And I'm going to help every way I can to help unlock that so you can get there. These things are so powerful. And to me, I feel like this is a competitive differentiator for the companies that do it well. Would you agree?
I think so. As you were talking, it reminded me of something that I told somebody many years ago when I worked in the factory. And I had a habit of being consistent in how I communicate with others to be professional at all times, to the best of my ability. And somebody asked me about it one time, and I stopped and looked at them. I said, what people may not realize is that the actions you take around other people, the way you communicate with other people, can have a positive or negative effect years on the road that you may never be aware of. You have to be so mindful of how you interact with others. I think about my son, and how I raise and try to mold him the best of my ability, you may never know the full impact of that. From a leader standpoint, professionally, it's our job to always take the high road, to always raise the bar and empower our staff, but also do that for ourselves.
You are a lid on your team's success, right? So keep on raising that lid or you cap it off. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So serious, such a good conversation, but so serious. Can I wrap with something fun? Are you good with that?
Go for it.
What is something fun about Travis that would not be in your official bio? I couldn't find it by scouring your LinkedIn. Something unique or different about you, something kind of fun. What would that be?
The thing that people most mention, it's been years back.
Okay.
I climbed Kilimanjaro back in 2013.
Oh,
And what I laugh about now when people ask me about the trip wasn't really the climb. It was how I got there the second time. Because I climbed Kilimanjaro in '08. I collapsed from altitude sickness around, I think it was like 18,000 feet. I collapsed 4 times, didn't make it, went back to base camp. 5 years later, there was a radio show based out of Dallas, and they had this contest where you would write in and enter in whatever your dream or wish was. They picked me for one of the weeks they were doing the contest and paid me to go back. So that's how I got to go back and climb that second time.
oh my! And you made it the second time?
Yeah, it went on the Machami route in 2013. Some of it was 19,351, I think. But it was just the story about how I got to go back is what people are like, usually people are flabbergasted by that. So
I am blown away by that. That is so incredible. Tremendous. Man, you are a man of many talents, many skills, Mr. Travis. If someone wants to connect with you, wants to just follow what you're doing in the space, what's the best way for them to do that?
feel free to look me up on LinkedIn. I'm active. I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. So that's the best way to get in touch with me.
Perfect. I'll make sure and put that into the show notes here so everybody can reach out and connect. Thank you again for joining me, for your passion for developing people. It's coming through in the conversation so clearly today, and so many great lessons and tidbits and pieces shared. I am excited to go back through my own notes and comb some of those out. So thank you again for spending some time with us.
Definitely. Thanks for having me on, Ben. It's been great.
For sure. Yeah. So to everybody else out there, hope you got as many notes as I did. This was incredible. So many good one-liners, ideas and tips, strategies for how to do this well. Go out there, develop your people, help them see a vision for their future and help them realize that. We'll catch you again next time on We Are Only Human.
Thank you so much for joining me on the show today. I'm honored to have you as a listener. If you enjoyed this episode, please take 10 seconds to rate it at iTunes, Stitcher, or wherever you listen to your podcast. Also, if you know a friend that could benefit from today's conversation, please pass it their way. After all, a rising tide lifts all ships. To see show notes, sponsor information, and our full show archives, visit onlyhumanshow.com.